So in this video, I want to talk to you guys about color theory. Color theory is probably the most important thing when it comes to makeup, painting, anything where you're trying to be artistic and creative. Once you understand color theory, everything else comes so much easier when it comes to creating. So first off, let's talk about the primary colors. Okay, starting with the primary colors, we have red, blue, and yellow. Your secondary colors are violet, orange, and green. Your tertiary colors are going to be the colors that are in between. So you mix a primary and secondary color to create a tertiary color, which would be blue, green, yellow, green, orange, yellow, red, orange, violet, red, and blue, violet. So I found this chart. This one's super awesome because it looks like the one I had when I was in art class. But primary colors you can see on the right hand side are red, yellow, and blue. Secondary would be orange, green, and purple. And then the tertiary colors would be all the ones that are in between the mixture of primary and secondary. So I actually found a chart with the tertiary colors on it, and it tells you the exact names. Instead of saying blue green or yellow green or anything like that, it tells you the exact names. So we have teal, chartreuse, amber, vermilion, magenta, and violet. So once you understand the primary, secondary, and tertiary colors, then everything else becomes a lot easier when you're understanding what cancels what out and what creates what. So just a quick rundown, when a color is opposite of itself on the color wheel, like yellow and purple, they are considered complementary colors. So your complementary colors are red and green, blue and orange, and yellow and purple. From there, you would just line up whatever's opposite, and that's how you would know what is complementary to the next color. Complementary colors also neutralize each other. So if you were to mix orange and blue together, or purple and yellow, green and red, what's going to happen is it's going to make a very muted and brown, muddy color. Once you can understand and memorize that, then working with the tertiary colors becomes a lot easier when trying to manipulate the color to change to a different hue. So when discussing colors, we refer to the color that we are discussing as the hue, which is the purest form of the color. So if you're talking about red, red is the hue. If you're talking about blue, blue is the hue. If you're talking about amber, amber is the hue. It's really important to understand the lingo when you're talking about things, especially if you are a makeup artist or you're becoming one, or if you are a hairstylist or becoming a hairstylist. Once you understand the lingo, it becomes so much easier to communicate with someone else in your field, and it also becomes a lot easier to understand someone else in your field. For those of you that are really interested in learning this, I don't know if you've noticed, but at the bottom of this chart, it's a tint, shade, and tone. If you want to learn about that, I'm going to make a part 2 to this video that I'll link in the comments, so that way you can go check out that video. Otherwise, this video is part 2 to color theory. If you are interested in learning color theory and you want to know what the primary, secondary, and tertiary colors are, you can go ahead and watch part 1. This video is going to be dedicated to explaining what tint, shade, and tone means when it comes to talking about a color. So one thing that's really important is once you understand what the primary, secondary, and tertiary colors are, then you can kind of understand what the tint, tone, and shade would be of each individual color. When referring to a color, we would call that the hue. The hue is whatever color that we are working with. So I'm going to use red because I found a perfect chart to explain this, and they chose the color red to use. So we're just going to use red as the example. Real quickly, before I explain this chart, just remember any color that you are working with is referred to as the hue. So if it's forest green is your hue that you are working with. So in this chart, red is the color that we're working with. So red is the hue. And then over here we have shade, tone, and tint. So we take the hue of the color, which would be red in this case, and you're going to take white, mix them together, and that's going to give you a tint. Then red mixed with gray is going to give you the tone. Gray will mute the red, which then will give you the undertone of the color, which is why we refer to it as the tone. Here we have red mixed with black would then give you the shade of the color, which would be the deepest version of that color. When discussing tint, tone, and shade, it's important to know those terms so that way when you're discussing a color, you understand if it's a light, medium, muted, or dark shade. Anything that's referred to as tint would then be, just remember in your head, it is the lightest form of that hue. The tone would be the most muted version of that hue. And the shade would be the darkest version of that hue. I want to give you just a little bit of an example, so hopefully this would make it easier to kind of understand and remember in your head. Picture yourself sitting at a table and you have a white piece of paper in front of you and you have to paint a bouncy ball. To paint this bouncy ball, you only have the color green and you have white, gray, and black to kind of mix together to make this picture look real. What you're going to do first is you're going to paint the entire circle that you've made on the piece of paper and you're going to make it green. You are going to then take a little bit of that green and mix it with the white, and the white and the green are going to give you the tint, which will give the highlight to your picture. Mixing it with gray will help mute it and give the ball shape. So now you have your tint, your tone, and your shadow, which will create a sphere in the picture and make it look 3D. So at the top of this picture is where the tint would be, which is the lightest form of the color. The center would then be the tone, which we know is green. It's the most muted point of the picture. And then below would be the shade, which is where the shadow is. So that way you have your 3 tint, tone, and shade. I hope the imagery was a little bit helpful. I know these videos are super short and I'm just kind of shoving a ton of information, but these are the most basic steps to learning color theory.